For my topic this year, I'm doing sports physical therapy, and this is actually brought to my attention through my older brother and through me doing ISM last year in ISM 1 where I did pediatric physical therapy. And one of the big things that I've set as a goal for this year actually happens to be my quote, which is learn everything you can, anytime you can, from anyone you can. There will always come a time when you will be grateful you did. And I chose this quote this year because specifically in physical therapy, everything is always evolving. Your body's always changing. Something can always be different about a way you do an exercise or anything like that. And so by taking this quote, it'll really help me as a physical therapist in the future and as a student this year, just developing my skills. Why I chose physical therapy. Ever since I was really little, I've wanted to do something in the medical field, and last year, because I really liked kids, I thought that maybe pediatrics would be the way to go. And I kind of realized throughout the year last year that that's kind of a depressing thing, because all of these kids that are having to go to physical therapy, they were born with some kind of disability. And honestly, just seeing that all the time and being around it, it can be really rewarding, but at the same time, you never get the child back to a state that you could say is normal. And they don't really like to use that term because it's kind of degrading, but in all honesty, it's not like they're going to be like a normal child. So that's when I came to sports physical therapy. Because I play soccer, I've always kind of been in the realm where I've gotten injured, and until last year, I'd never actually been to physical therapy. And whenever I went last year for a high ankle sprain, I actually really started to learn a lot about the sports aspect of physical therapy, and it really got me interested. For my research so far this year, I started all of my assessments based off of stuff that I was experiencing. So for my first research assessment, I did it over LCL injuries, and this is because over Labor Day weekend I was in a soccer tournament and I planted my knee wrong, and it was really hurting for a while, and so I had gone to the trainer and she had said that she might think that I had overstretched my LCL. And what your LCL is, it's a ligament on the outside of your knee, and what it does is it helps stabilize whenever you're running and you're cutting and stuff like that. And it's really interesting because an LCL isn't commonly torn, but whenever it is torn, it's usually done in threes, where you tear your LCL, your ACL, and partially tear your meniscus, which brought me to my second research assessment, which was meniscus tears. Because after I'd gone to an orthopedic doctor for my predicted LCL injury, he had been moving and manipulating my knee and realized that it might have actually been a partial tear in my meniscus. And so this freaked me out because I didn't really know what that meant either. I know that obviously you don't want to tear something in your knee because, well, nothing in your knee is supposed to be torn. So I researched meniscus tears, and what I found was that meniscus is actually a cartilage in your knee. And the thing that was really scary about this is because no one was really telling me what was going on, but after my research, I kind of freaked myself out, in all honesty, because once your meniscus is completely worn down, it could get to the point where they can't regenerate and they can't have surgery on it, and just because the cartilage is completely gone. And this is like a really big deal because once it's gone, even activities like running and jumping and stuff like that can hurt, and even worse than that, like just walking could hurt on a daily basis. And so after I did my meniscus tears assessment, I researched the anterior cruciate ligament, which is your ACL, and injuries in female soccer players, because obviously I play soccer, so I'm going to be interested in that aspect of everything. And your ACL is actually one of the most common injuries. Tearing your ACL is one of the most common injuries in soccer, and specifically in female soccer players. And this is because the way that girls, their hips are built, their hips naturally angle in, and this is actually called your Q angle, which I researched in this assessment. And because your hips naturally go in, there's a different pressure that's put on your knees. And so this is why it's more common for females to tear it than men. For my fourth assessment, I did it over the UNT trip. And I'm just going to talk about one of my classes because the other two kind of didn't work out very well. But I went to a sports psychology class, and it wasn't necessarily completely having to do with physical therapy, but some aspects of it I knew I could apply to it. And one of the big things that they talked about was communication. And communication is obviously going to be a really big part of being a physical therapist, because you have to convey to someone how to do an exercise and how they can do it at home by themselves when they don't have you to ask questions, and how to keep patients encouraged when they're really just feeling down on themselves because they're injured and they can't do what they love to do. And so we talked a lot about in this class the different types of communication, and I kind of knew it because you can just kind of apply logic to it, but to hear it in an actual lecture, the whole nonverbal communication is actually the biggest form. And this is really important for when you're being a physical therapist, because if they can see that on your face that they're not getting better, or if you're like manipulating their leg or something, if they have a knee injury and they can see that you're showing on your face that they're not where they're supposed to be, then it's just really going to discourage them and they're not going to want to work as hard. And so after the UNT trip, I did research on knee kinematics during non-contact ACL injuries. And what this is most ACL tears don't actually happen from contact from one person hitting another person. A lot of the times it's just somebody planting wrong and their knee giving way and twisting wrong or jumping wrong and landing in an incorrect manner, which can tear it completely or partially. And what I actually researched with this was bone bruise location, because whenever I hurt my knee, my PT told me that it was because my quads weren't strong enough, which is actually kind of sad because it's like I work out all the time and I'm still not strong enough to keep my knee stabilized. So that was frustrating. But what I researched with this is whenever you tear your ACL, and it actually made a lot of sense, when you tear your ACL, the connection between your quad and your femur and then your tibia, those connections are also broken. So it's like you have to get those both back before you can get your actual ACL back intact. So it was really interesting to hear that, because like obviously it makes sense, but you never really think about it until you've had to hear it. And so after that, I did anterior cruciate ligament and knee injury prevention programs, because there's a lot of prevention programs out there specifically for female soccer players, because it's such a big injury that happens. And this one was also one of those ones that was kind of self-explanatory. They basically had a prevention program set up, and they took a bunch of female soccer players and put half of them through the program and then half of them that just didn't do the program. And then they compared results of their strength in their knees and in their quads. And the result, obviously, was those who did the prevention program were a lot more stable, had a lot stronger muscles, were less likely to tear their ACLs than the people who didn't do the prevention program. And for my last assessment, I did the influence of quadricep strength asymmetry on patient-reported function at the time of return to sport. And so this goes off of the 2 research assessments before it. And because the ACL tears, your quad has to readjust to everything too. And so this showed that people who had, when they went to physical therapy, did a lot more quad strengthening, they were able to return to sport quicker than those who just focused on the knee itself. Because if you just focus on the knee itself, the rest of your body isn't necessarily getting stronger. Whereas if you build the entire leg and even your other leg that's not injured, then you're developing as a whole person, and then you're less likely to hurt something later on. So it was really cool researching all of that, and that actually goes into what I plan on doing for my original work. And so this is the knee anatomy, in case you're wondering. The ACL is that one straight in the middle under the kneecap. And so I'm focusing my original work on the ACL because it's such a big injury in female soccer players. What I plan on doing is getting with my mentor, who I'm going to talk about later, and we are going to create a Google form, and it's going to have a lot of different questions that are common questions that you could ask somebody who's had an ACL injury. And we're going to get all of the data after it's been sent out to all of the Frisco high schools, and all of the female soccer players have taken and completed this form. We're going to take all of this data and find statistical differences between different aspects that lead to ACL injuries, such as, was it on a grass field or was it on a turf field? What kind of cleats were you wearing? Did it happen at school soccer? Did it happen at club soccer? Just a bunch of different aspects like that. And then once we have all of the data, we're going to find a statistic, like probability of each one. And if there is something that's statistically higher, I plan on developing that into my final product, which will most likely be an article about all of my findings. So for my interviews, last year I already kind of knew who my mentor was going to be, and so I only really interviewed one person, which is my mentor, Joelle Murrow. She works at Ben Hogan Sports Medicine at FC Dallas, which is right down the street, and she was actually my physical therapist, and so it was really cool getting to talk to her last year when I was doing pediatrics. And so I had kind of mentioned the idea to her just trying to test the waters, see how she would feel about being my mentor, and she agreed to it really quickly. And Joelle this is her first job being at Ben Hogan. She came straight out of St. Louis University and started her internship with them, and they were so impressed that they just hired her on the spot. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to work with her this year, specifically because I will also get to the aspect of the SC Dallas players because they come in there all the time. So that'll also help just in general with my whole soccer, whatever, being obsessed with it because I love it. But yeah, so Joelle's going to be my mentor, and I'm looking forward to start my mentorship with her. And once we get that mentorship started, once our paperwork finally goes through, then I can start my original work and start collecting data. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you. Oh,
Hey, sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about your original work, what happens if you don't find like a statistical, variant that's higher than all the others?
Honestly, it'd be good if there isn't any statistical differences, because that would mean that it's just kind of a freak thing. But in all honesty, that's probably not going to happen, just because there's some questions that are going to be thrown in there because I know that it's going to be worse.
I know the answer.
Like turf fields, they're a lot more common for you to get injured than on grass because the turf has rubber and the bottom of your cleats will get stuck in it and it'll twist, and so that'll cause your knee to twist different ways. So statistically already I kind of know that it's going to be turf fields. So there's some questions that are thrown in there that I already know are going to have certain results.
Gotcha.
You gotta ask them the not knee.
Yeah.
Because my not knee kids, one of my girls, she broke she
Mhm.
had one Virginia year, the other one that when she came to a jump stop, her knees would go.
Yeah, that's really bad.
If they're not clean,
Yeah, if your knees naturally curve in.
So when she would do a jump stop, her knees would go in, and that makes that Q angle
Put pressure on it and
greater.
it goes in.
And plus, you can turn that off.
Nathan's like.